welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt. With me today are Louis D'Souza and Anne-Marie Young. This is your Daily Dose of Happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. And I have to say, guys, today is kind of like a sort of a flashback to the way things were done on the show about 4 years ago when I was doing 2 shows a day, because I did a submission of the show earlier today, and I'd forgotten how much work it is to do 2 shows a day. It's a lot. I mean, it was good. Her name is Disha Waddup. She's from your section of the world. She's from the UK, and she's a social media coach and really a marketing expert. And wow, it was a great in-depth conversation about getting businesses started and how you market them and how you build a group up and all this stuff. So yeah, it was really, really worthwhile. And I've got another one coming tomorrow with another one of your countrymen, a guy named Luca Senatore. I'm not sure how he pronounces his last name, but that's going to be for me tomorrow morning really early. So another 2-show day tomorrow. Like I'm glad those are the only 2 this week. Let's put it that way.
You're getting so many guests. You're just having to just like duplicate your shows, aren't you?
I have to duplicate me somehow. I need the Star Trek transporter to make 2 copies of me or something like that. But yeah.
You have to learn the master skill of bilocation.
I haven't gotten. I know you've talked about that. I haven't gotten that one down yet. I mean, have you been able to pull that one off?
No ways.
No way. Oh, good. It's nice to know.
I wish.
Well, part of the trick for that, isn't it? As I understand it, now I'm no expert because I've never pulled it off, but as I understand it, part of the trick is that you actually are conscious in both. And you're somehow supposed to be able to connect those together in your little human mind. I don't really know how that works. Somehow you're supposed to be able to do that.
Try and deal with one of me is enough.
Yeah, right. Oh, yeah, it's a full-time job for me, I'll tell you. Oof. But no, still very much worth it. It was a great conversation. And I'm looking forward to tomorrow's conversation as well. It's going to be really good. But in the meantime, if you don't mind, guys, I'm going to treat today as kind of a relax, take a break after what I did this morning. Yeah.
No problem.
Sometimes you have to kind of do that. I think it falls under the category of self-care.
Because it falls under the category with Abraham Hicks's step 3.
Okay, well, yes, this is true.
Relief and release.
Relief and release. That's exactly what it feels like too. It's like, okay, done. Yeah, got all the stuff sent out. Yeah, it was good. So but there is that relief that comes from, part of the relief comes from, I know you guys real well. So I know I don't have to do anything. It's not like I have to plan anything. I can just chat with you guys for an hour and it's great. So that's relief and release all by itself. But yeah, also getting this morning's thing done was good. I was glad to get it done, but it's done.
I went to my daughter, my 6-year-old's birthday party. Now, this isn't somebody in her class. This is the class, because, in the year they have different classes in one year. They've actually got about 4 classes in one year or something. So it was one of the other classes. She had made friends with this bunch, and I invited this girl, the 6-year-old from the other class, to Eloise's birthday party. Now I got invited to her birthday party. But when she came, the mother came to pick up the daughter, we had this like really good, deep, in-depth chat, and she brought along her friend, and her friend was somebody from the Met Police.
Oh.
And we had a good chat. I had a good chat with her as well, and really bonded with her about philosophy, ideas, and beliefs and stuff like that. That was all cool. So I arrive at the home because I've now been invited to her daughter's birthday party at her home. So I meet up with the mom, and the mom's got a wannabe boyfriend. Who's I said, can you explain to me who everybody here is? And she says, my friend. And he told me he's interested in her. So that's why I get the wannabe.
2 + 2, got it.
But we had this hugely in-depth conversation. Now, the first thing he said to me is, we've met before walking down from school with the kids.
Oh.
And I said, yes, I remember now. Do you remember the conversation? Now, I brought up this conversation before on the show a few times. And it's all about this guy saying, the world's falling apart and everything's crazy, and he's worried about the future, etc. So I said to him, and he was saying, Satan's taking over, etc.
I remember that. Yeah.
So I said to him, how do you destroy Satan? What's the one thing you can do to completely destroy Satan? And he frowns and he looks at me, he's all confused. And I said, give him love. And he looked at me and he started to realize that, yeah, that's one thing, that when you're in the vibration of that positivity, there can't be negativity, the concept. So, I said, you're not going to hear a lot of priests on the stage promoting the love of Satan, but
not really, no.
No. But if you understand the law of attraction,
if they sold it as like Satan's version of kryptonite, they might be able to get it across that way. But yeah, I don't think they're going to go through the love thing. That's not going to work for them.
They need to be Superman though. So the interesting thing was, I bumped into this guy before. What's the chances of bumping into this guy that I brought up on the podcast a few times?
Well, knowing the law of attraction, pretty good.
Exactly. So we had this like really deep philosophical conversation, and talked about all different angles and all the rest of it. And we managed to get it in before everybody came around, and it got too busy. And yeah, it was really, really cool. So yeah, I'm always amazed at how I managed to draw these kind of conversations out of any function or meeting or situation that I land up in. It's just really great.
Well, you love having those conversations. You love when they show up on your doorstep, so to speak.
They absolutely do. So had he used any of what you were saying to him? Had you noticed?
What have I? Do I love Satan? Yeah, of course. Well, all my heart.
No.
So your emails too.
Had he done anything different?
No. He didn't even remember the gist of the conversation too well either. He just once I re-related it to him, says, "Oh yeah, I remember now." But now I could fill in the blanks and why I thought like that, etc., and brought in a little bit of law of attraction, etc. So yeah, just really fun having these conversations in the sauna. I remember I was telling you the other day, I landed up with this guy. We were both on the top step, then we moved to the middle step, and then eventually we were sitting on the floor in the sauna so we can continue the conversation. We were both sweating. Not from the conversation, but from the sauna.
Yeah, right.
But he was amazing, because he could really take what I was saying, integrate it into his Christian philosophy, and put it back on me. And the big discussion that was going on was all about God in his mind, or source in my mind, is finished. It's complete. It's done. And I said to him, no, I believe source is endlessly expanding. And the discussion was why we were thinking this way, and how, and all the rest of it. That was one aspect that we were talking about, but it was the one that most interested me, because I've never openly had a discussion with anybody about, is source, complete and finished and done, dusted, or is it endlessly expanding? And there really are ideas which I actually started pointing out eventually, that they don't need to be mutually exclusive.
No, they aren't.
No, they don't need to be. So,
no.
You can have it perfectly expanding all the time.
Yep. Part of this has to do with the way human language works, because human language is broken up into tenses: past tense, present tense, future tense, and some other, perfect tenses and so forth. But those are the main ones. And because of that, we think in those tenses. We think in future, present, past. And we express ourselves, and all of our wording is expressed as either a past tense, present tense, future tense, or some perfect version of one of those. And because of that, we end up kind of tripping over ourselves when we try to discuss and explain things that are outside of time, because those are all time related.
Absolutely.
So the problem that we're really experiencing when we're talking about this stuff and saying, well, everything's all completed, or saying nothing's all completed, it's all going to be completed, or it's all in the process of completing. Those are just three different tenses for saying the same thing, because we don't have a way to express it outside of time. So we have to use a tense.
The other aspect that I like to be really honest about is that that's a guess. That is what Abram has said, and I'm not necessarily know for a truth for myself. So I like the idea of thinking that source endlessly expands and that I'm part of the expansion, etc. I just like the idea, but it's not necessarily what it is. I can't prove it. I haven't got personal experience of that. So I like to be really, really honest when I talk about that and say that, you know, this is my hypothesis at the moment. You come up with a better one, I'll probably jump on it in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
I don't have any need to hold on to my belief structure. I'm very happy to be fluid enough to take on the next thing that seems to be more in the way that I think it does work. I will drop what I currently believe in a heartbeat. And yeah, we were having that conversation at the party as well, all about what is belief. Because, you know, we know from Abraham Hicks that belief is a thought you think often. And a 13-year-old girl said to me, Louis, I believe you're a nice guy, but I haven't thought about it often.
You can always count on a teenager.
So we only saw every month, so I was a little bit flummoxed by this. So I went home and thought about it. You know, I love these 13-year-olds. And then I thought about it, and then I realized that she used the wrong word. She should have used the word thought, because belief rarely is a thought you've thought more often. She should, Louis, I think you're a nice guy, but I haven't thought about it often. But to use the word belief, it's really not accurate. So you kind of get shades between the word thought and belief. And what it is, it's just a more solid vibration.
And in some sense, she's actually on solid ground in one sense, because English is such a multi-valued language. Words get used all over the place in so many different ways. The same word used, 25 different ways. So,
but not necessarily particularly accurately.
Well, hey,
the level of accuracy. That's what I love about English. It's so they've got so many different words for the same thing, but some are a little more accurate for that situation than others. You know, they just are. And I love that. I love that aspect of English. But
it's true. It's true. On the flip side, also perception plays a big role in it too, because even if you have shades of meaning that you're describing there between words, it's often difficult to get people to agree what those shades are, because they have different perceptions of what the words are.
The interesting thing is, I did go back after clearly thinking about it and explaining to her how I thought about it, and she did agree with me. So that's the flip side.
That was good. It was rewarding,
she did get what I was pointing out, which I like. There's some validation there, which I sometimes enjoy. But yeah, so there was other conversations in the sauna, but there was one guy who was very he always wanted to argue with everything I was saying, not for the sake of argumentation, but the sake of getting his side in. You know, just wanting to voice his level of opinion. And what he said to me, "You've obviously thought about this a lot, Louis."
Was that an accusation?
Some of us haven't thought about it that much. Because he was saying to me he really feels bad about this whole beggar thing. And I said, why? What are you thinking when you see a beggar? Oh, they're just stealing money, and if they can beg, then they can work. And he goes on and on like that. So I said to him, there's another way of looking at it, of course. I said, what do you mean? I said, he's put all these situations in place to be there on that street. He's created all this energy and all this stuff to be there on the street in the form of begging at this time. It's an incredible journey that he's taken to get there. And, he's got there for a specific reason. And there are shelters in this country, and there are homes, and there are food places, and there are stuff that he can go to if he wants to. and there are jobs available at the moment. There's actually quite a few
Yeah.
at the moment. So he is able to go do that if he wants, but he chooses to be there. So why don't you just smile and be happy for him? And he's doing what he wants. I mean, he gets £30 an hour and it's tax free. I mean, what's the problem? He says, that's why I don't give him any money. But I said, that's one way of looking at it.
Sure.
That's,
Yeah.
if you looked at it, and he said, "Oh, I haven't really thought about it from that angle." And I said, you don't think like normal people. It's like, okay.
We can adjust to this.
So it's just interesting when you get people to start looking at the way they're looking at situations, because they paint pictures which they could really paint in a different way. They could look a whole lot prettier to them.
Something else you said cued something in my mind too, because you mentioned how you, like all of us, would like validation. And you mentioned this gentleman who was negating everything because he was looking to get validation for his viewpoint. It reminds me of something that I was reading about just last night. There's a book that came out about 8 years ago, something like that, called Contagious. Basically, it's a book that explores how it is that things become popular quickly, how things go viral, that sort of thing. One of the points that he makes in the book is that when you look at what motivates people to share something, because that's what virality really is, it's something being shared a lot. When you look at what motivates people to share, one of the big things is they want to be considered in the know, so to speak. They want to be considered somebody who's got a one up on you, like, oh, I got this really cool thing. I'm going to impress you or excite you or entice you with this wonderful thing that I found so that I can get a little attention from you. And it's a really great point. That is a major part of why stuff becomes popular and why people share things. I mean, we often like to think about sharing as being, well, I'm sharing for the benefit of somebody else, but there's also the benefit to themselves. We kind of overlook that part, but there's a big benefit that people get. In fact, there was a Harvard study. This was also in the book. There was a Harvard study done where I don't remember exactly how the study went. Oh, I know what it was. The students at Harvard University, of course, they're involved in every study ever in existence because that's where all the studies get done. Poor students. But anyway, the students at Harvard University were asked what they would choose in terms of an income. They had two different jobs, basically the same job. One job pays $50,000 a year. The other job pays $100,000 a year. But there's one proviso you have to understand. The one paying $50,000 a year is working for a company where you'd be the highest paid employee and everyone else is being paid $25,000 a year. Whereas the one earning $100,000, you'd be working at a company where everybody else was earning $200,000 a year. So you'd be earning half of what everybody else was earning. And the interesting thing that happened was a majority of the students said they would take the $50,000 a year job.
Because what do they also get with that 50,000? They get power,
status, power. Yeah.
Recognition, status, and power.
Recognition. Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
Now, in the network marketing circles that I was in, they always said people will do more for recognition than they will do for money.
It's true, apparently. At least among the Harvard students. I don't know about everybody else, but
the other thing is there's a book called The Challenger Sale. It's really interesting. And you see which one of these 4 categories or 5 categories that you fit into. And one is where you empathize with the other person, another, and sell to them. Another one where you are very good at explaining. The other one is the lone wolf who goes off and he does it in his own unique way and is a very good salesman. And the one that is the most successful is the challenger. And the challenger is when they've got one up on somebody. Do you know that this product can do this for you that you didn't know before? When you've got something to add, some value to add into it. So you're challenging belief structures. So you become the challenger sale. And they say they're the most effective salespeople out there.
I'm going to compare that to what I was reading in this book. The book was laying out, I think, 5 or 6 different categories of behaviors and presentation patterns and so forth. I want to see if that fits into it. I'm not sure if it does or not, but it might. It's interesting though, because you're right. I think that's exactly what happens. The closest that I can think of from this book, they did give one story. I'm only partway through this book, but they gave one story where, let's see, how'd it go? A guy had come up with not a blender. It was a machine for grinding flour and so forth in the
Mhm.
kitchen, because he had noticed there really wasn't anything out there in the marketplace. So he figured he would
No,
invent.
there isn't. I don't know if anyone that grinds, wheat
Well,
into
he invented
flour.
one, and it apparently was really well done. I mean, he invented something solid. It wasn't, some plastic thing made in an underpaid
Yeah,
factory in China. It was
can't
real.
see it selling though.
Well, that was the problem, and he wasn't
Yeah.
sure how to sell it, and he had no marketing budget to sell it, and he ended up convincing a friend of his who had been working as a high-powered marketing guy at a large corporation to come work for him and help him get his thing sold. And the guy commented that the job he left had a budget that was twice as large as the entire income of the guy he was going to work for. But anyway, he got to talking to him and found out that this thing could cut up almost anything. You could put a cell phone in, and it would cut up the cell phone. You could
Oh wow.
and it would chop up the marbles into this fine dust. So he put a lab coat on the guy, and he put a camera in front of him, and had him feed stuff into this thing, which was really just a grinder. I mean, it was just grinding stuff up.
Mhm.
And then he put it on social media, and it just took off like wildfire.
Viral.
Everybody wanted to point out, I know this really cool thing you guys don't know. Let me share it with you.
Wow.
So did he get any sales out of it? That's
He got tons of sales.
he?
They did really, really well. Yeah, it's currently a product. I'd have to go look it up. I don't remember what the name of it was. Yeah, pretty cool that he was able to do that. But marbles, I mean, rocks, I mean, he just put the stuff in it. You do that with most household appliances, and they'll just, give up the ghost. They're done. But there's an example of how if you can find the angle that gives people the ability to say, I know something you don't know, you get yourself potentially something that will go viral. It's pretty cool. I'm still learning what the other pieces are. There are a bunch of them.
Mhm.
But yeah, the other thing that's interesting too is that when you look at what goes viral, you can kind of look at something that became very popular and say, well, that's because of this or that's because of that. And it turns out when you actually do the studies to find out whether that was true, most of the perceptions are wrong. Most
I
of the
was gonna,
reasons you think that something is becoming popular are not the reasons why they became popular. It's pretty wild.
yeah, and I was gonna say, as quick as it kicks off, a lot of these things just then get dropped so quickly nowadays, I find. So you could be
Yeah, short
successful for
sessions.
like 5 minutes.
Mm.
5 minutes can be enough. All you need is your audience.
Yeah,
Once you get
well,
the
that's
audience, you're good.
true.
And then if you get the email list and you promote other things.
Mhm.
Well, that was actually another topic from the interview I did this morning, because she has a list of 7 different ways to build up, start something. Remember how with Kelly Emery, you were on the show. We were
Yes.
talking about how would you start something from scratch? How would you start a Facebook group? Could you do it on any topic? Turn
Yeah.
into this. What we were talking about, you and being a poet and wanting to help other people be published and all that kind of stuff. Well, we kind of carried that out a few steps more in today's interview, and the way we did it was she identified, I think she said 7 different ways that you can market, that you can basically build up the talk around your thing and get more and more attention for it.
Mhm.
And one of the things was emails, because that's still a
Yeah.
very viable marketing method. There were a bunch of others too. But the interesting thing was, after she went through them, and she went through them in very great detail and a fairly rapid clip. And I was kind of imagining what it's like from the perspective of the audience member, because that's the way I was trying to respond to her. And when she was done, I said, that all sounds great, but I'm absolutely totally intimidated. I don't even know where to begin. There's so many things in that list. No, I actually did, but I can just see, your
Yeah.
average listener saying, I'm just like, where do I start? I'm overwhelmed with work. I haven't even started this thing. And that really is, to me, a key point, because we ask about having abundance in our lives. We want to attract abundance into our lives. Very often that does require taking some physical actions.
Yeah.
what we often call inspired action or initiating some sort of inspired activity, and that can be intimidating. It can be frightening. It basically taps into who we are and challenges us on many levels. And I think all those levels all really amount to is what's our level of self-esteem? How do we feel about ourselves? How
Hmm.
confident are we?
Hmm. Hmm.
And I was really
Hmm.
I was tapping into that as I was doing this interview in a big, strong way of recognizing, wow, that really explains why it is so few people go into business for themselves. Because study after study has shown the population as a whole across the planet has, generally speaking, generally has low self-esteem. There's not a whole lot of people in the general population with high self-esteem. And yet it's essential to succeeding in business.
But you know, even somebody who gets a good d- dollop of self-esteem, well, people attack them and challenge them and push
Of
them down and
course.
bring them down. So, you know, even if you've got good self-esteem, you really have to have a lot of it before you say to everybody, you know, I'm very confident.
Well, that's it.
Um,
Exactly it. And I think that's why
but
it is so few people are willing to try. That's why even if they knew that there was something that they would enjoy doing and that they could actually
mm,
do, they and I've been one of those people in the past, they talk themselves out of it.
yeah, yeah. I mean, every time there is a prime minister in this country who's like, you know, really got a good campaign and is doing well and all the rest of it, and everybody loves him. As soon as he gets in power, they all want to kill him. They want to tear him
Yes, it's
apart.
true.
It's like,
It's true.
oh my God. How does this work? You
Are
know,
you sure
we'll
that it
build him
does?
up just to knock him down. That's cool.
So does that
uh,
relate to the other conversation, the fact that we all like to think that we know more,
It does.
and then when somebody is successful, that intimidates us and we beat them down?
Yeah.
it does. We do feel intimidated many times. Even I've noticed it
Mm,
clearly in myself that if somebody's more successful in something that I'm really trying to be successful in, then it knocks me for a six, or used to. Now, when you understand the law of attraction, it starts becoming easier because you start realizing that everybody has their own pie and that you're not directly competing against anybody because your
yes.
point of attraction is completely different to everybody else's. So the law of attraction can really help your confidence by understanding that there is no limit to that pie ever.
It's true. It's very true.
Hmm.
And it's an in-depth kind of understanding, but it's a vital one. And like you say, it has that impact.
Mm,
Another piece of the whole puzzle too is the realization that self-esteem, self-love, self-confidence, all that stuff are they aren't a fixed thing, fixed in stone. They change. They change over time because our confidence levels get impacted by what we experience. That's why we have so much trouble when we get exposed to the law of attraction in the first place, because we are so primed, we're so trained to believe that our experiences are based on what happens to us rather than what we think about and what we focus our attention on. And because of that, that's where default behavior comes from. Like, okay, well, I feel powerless here, so I'm just going to wait and see what happens to me, and then I'll just say, well, it would happen because of that X thing over there.
it's Walt's fault.
It's Walt's fault. It's all my fault. It was always my fault. You know that.
No, Anne-Marie's as well. uh,
Yeah, it's never one's own fault, right? Yeah. But that's what happens when you have a whole population, not a whole population, but a large chunk of the population, certainly a super majority of the population that has esteem issues, self-esteem issues. Because if you have self-esteem issues, what's going to happen? Well, first of all, you're not going to feel good. Second of all, when you have an opportunity to shine, you're going to take it because you need to feed it, right? So that's why you want to be that expert who, oh, I know this cool thing you don't know, because it's helping to build you up. And then when you finally do meet somebody who has stronger self-esteem, who's feeling stronger than you are, you feel intimidated about it.
mm,
And so you got to knock them down. That's the phenomenon you were describing, Louis, where
Mm.
the guy gets into office and all of a sudden everybody's got to knock him down. Why? Because he feels better about himself than the population does. Well, they can't have that.
there's also an aspect of teaching in that knocking down. I had in the Met Police a manager who took great pride in his meetings where he always sat at the head of the table. He wound his chair up to as high as it would go and dominated the entire thing and controlled it. And people walked out of those meetings very often crying because
Wow.
he would literally attack their lack of knowledge in the different areas where they're supposed to be proficient. And he'll say, how can you come to me as a project manager and you don't even know what a milestone is? And this lady never wanted to be in a meeting with him before because he really tore her to pieces. Just basic things that and the interesting thing was I never had a problem with this guy anywhere through it. And I wasn't the most professional or organized. He just couldn't get to me, even if he tried, and he knew it. And I wasn't going to be anything or anyone he was going to deal with. So we had long, nice philosophical conversations together, and very, very amicable arrangement between him and I. And he kept me on for over 7 years in the Met Police. So he actually liked me as well,
Right.
even though he never said it or anything. But the important thing that I came out there, I mean, my direct manager was an Irish lady, and she came out of his meetings so like fuming. You could just see she was fuming or crying, one of the two. And quite often until she started we're realizing how to work with him. But he was a teacher. He was helping them understand the inadequacies and strengthening them. And if I was weak, like in that aspect, then he would have challenged me as well. I would have had the same problem as everybody else. But slowly but surely, I watched my boss get stronger and stronger and being able to deal with her boss, this big guy,
Right.
better and better and better, and eventually didn't phase her at all. So, I watched the whole cycle of him training her and teaching her with a whip, and some people teach with love and some people teach with a whip. And some students prefer a whip and some students prefer love.
See, that's so interesting because I would have presumed that people working under them would have been less motivated, it wouldn't have been so productive. But actually, the way you've just worded that,
Temporarily, yes.
yeah.
In the long
But they
term,
learn
they
their
come out
onions, don't they?
stronger, that they can deal with any of these guys anywhere else in life.
They build that thicker skin and that expertise.
But it's not
It's really
necessarily a thicker
interesting.
skin, it's more like a no skin. A thicker skin is pushing away what you don't want. A no skin means it just flows through you and you don't care a shit. It's like nothing. Yeah. So you really got to make sure you don't create a thick skin.
But what you just
want it to go
described
through
there,
you.
what you just described there also shows what the limitation is of his approach. Because yes, he probably did get some results out of it, but it's like with anything else where somebody does a deep dive into the negative, into the low vibe, and then comes bouncing back out, they're stronger as a result. Yeah, they're stronger, but what happened to their respect for you and what you're trying to accomplish? Was
If
that
he's strong enough, he doesn't care.
well?
The objective for him is who's next, who can I train in the way I know how to train next.
Again, that depends on what his goals are. You're right. If his goal is only to train, then I suppose that would be considered a success. But that's not necessarily going to play out as a success in the business world.
It's not gonna play out as a success in the popularity market. But some of the most successful leaders in the world have been quite unpopular.
It's true. Yep. But by the same token, I think it also can backfire, is what I'm saying. You can build it up. You can get the other person's built up to such an extent that they're immune to you, and now you can't get anything done anymore because your technique doesn't work anymore.
Yeah. So you get very few people who can be Gandhi. So Gandhi would go to a rooftop if he didn't like what the population was doing and starve himself and wouldn't eat anything until the population changed their mind. Then he would come back.
Yeah.
And everybody loved him for it because he didn't force them, he didn't hit them, he didn't bully them, he didn't cajole them, he starved himself.
Yeah,
it's fascinating. There's not many people who can do that.
No, not many. Not many. Got to give him credit. Credit where credit is due.
He never brought the whip out ever. And when the British were were fighting him. So what he did is he got all the Indians to stand in a long, long line, all the males, go up to the British officer, and the officer would hit them down. And then the next one would stand in line, then hit him down, and the next one. So it was just an orderly approach, not a big, massive, fight against the British rule, etc. It was, let's just show them where we're not going to stop. Next person, hit them down, until you get bored of hitting people down,
Mhm.
or you feel it's wrong, or, you get something inside you that doesn't feel right anymore. And a lot of the British soldiers didn't want to hit anybody anymore. It just didn't feel right. So you've got
Real-
this whole different way of approaching the the a way of ruling, I suppose, a way of leading.
It reminds me of the story of a young king of Botswana from the 1950s. So this would have been after Gandhi, but before most of Africa became independent of colonial rule. And at the time, Botswana was known as Bechuanaland. And this young king essentially did something that was unique for his culture. And that was he tried to weave a path in between what the British were trying to do and what was going on in South Africa that didn't play either one of their games. And the game at
Mhm.
that point was basically about apartheid. He just wouldn't play the game. And there comes a crisis. There's a film that was made about it called A United Kingdom. Very interesting film, worth watching. That film depicts a moment where he and his uncle, and this is important because of the way that the kingships worked during that time and in historical times leading up to that in Botswana. But they were at odds with each other, and because of that, it was making it very difficult for him to carry out his role because his uncle had a lot of sway for a variety of reasons. At one point, the British decide that because of this split, this schism within their family, they were going to take advantage of it to assert British rule. And so they basically declare that they are taking over the government because the government is split and is in danger of falling apart. So they're going to be the good guys and hold the whole thing together. And they're going to have their own governor and so forth to come in. And they have the tacit support of the uncle. So they figure, well, everything's golden. Well, the way that pre-democracy Botswana worked was somewhat democratic in its own way. They would meet, the tribes would meet, and in this case, it was a nation of tribes that would meet, and it was sort of like a democratic assemblage, but only males, and there would be a fight for the leadership, and whoever gained the acclamation of the tribes would become the leader. But that acclamation was almost always put behind the bloodline of whoever was next to be leader.
Mhm.
So it was both semi-democratic, semi-monarchical. It had flavors of all kinds of stuff going there. So anyway, they decide the British are going to put in their own ruler, and they call a meeting of that assembly to announce it formally and install the new government and so forth. And I'll call them the Senate, for the lack of a better term, or the assemblage or whatever. The assemblage didn't show up. They refused to come. So these British leaders show up at the place where the assemblage is supposed to happen, and there's nobody there, and they're furious. Like, where is everybody? We're supposed to be doing this today, and it just completely ruined their entire plan. Now they still did what they could to impose their rule anyway, but they were counting on this big ceremony essentially done in front of the entire male population to install their legitimacy, and it failed utterly and completely because they wouldn't participate. It makes me think of what Gandhi would do. Gandhi basically refused to participate.
Mm.
You're not going to behave the way I want you to behave. Okay, I'm not going to participate in society. I'm going to lock myself up and not eat any food until you guys change your mind. It's the same basic
Yeah.
concept. We won't participate until you shift.
The other let's talk about Botswana. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's the most successful country in Africa. But,
It's one of them for sure. Yeah, certainly
yeah,
top 3.
yeah. Which has always amazed me because it's a very quiet country, never any conflict, never hear anything about it. They just
Nope.
continue peacefully doing their stuff, and I love it. I have a lot of respect for that country, even though I have never been there. Yeah, I've never
Which
been
is
there.
weird because they're right next door to South Africa. I mean, it's not like they're far away.
Yeah, yeah. The Okavango swamps, I think, are there, and that's one of the reasons why I'd want to go. I'd love to see those. But they don't have a lot of attractions.
Well, they
Zimbabwe's
do
got
have a
Victoria
television series.
Falls,
There
and
was a TV series that was put together by the BBC a few years ago. It only lasted one season, but it was wonderful. Called the number one ladies detective agency, and it was the story of a Botswanan woman who inherited some wealth from her father and ended up deciding to use it to set herself up as a detective to help people, and gave you a really nice feel for Botswanan culture and so forth.
that
But
would have been interesting. Yeah.
really good. It came out about 10 years ago, something like that. Really, really good series. Yeah, I highly recommend that one too. But yeah, a little bit I've seen about Botswana, it's like I want to know more. It's a cool country.
Mm-hmm. The other thing about India, which is quite fascinating, is there's over 1,200 languages in the country.
Yeah, wow.
And if you go from one village to the next, they not only got a different language, they got a different religion and a different culture.
Right.
So imagine driving to the next town and it's like unbelievable. You can't even speak to them.
That's where you
So,
really need the translation on your cell phone, right? Otherwise, you're in trouble.
but they say that is what saved India from the British, because they never knew where the head of the snake was, because there was just so many snakes, so many
Right.
heads, so many different, groups that it was an idea that I'd never thought about or heard about. I never knew about the languages in India. It just blows your mind. It just absolutely blows your mind. From us Western perspective, it's really difficult to grasp. I mean, in South Africa, there's 13 official languages. Everyone's second choice is English, obviously, except English. But it's just really interesting because, in England, it's English. It's game over. That's it. And
in the
doesn't make
United States, but nobody can seem to talk to each other anyway. So yeah, too many dialects.
Yeah. So yeah, it's all very interesting. But I was just trying to think of ways of bringing the law of attraction into all this.
Well, I just made a note of something because I just think something that stood out for me is where he said, don't give them the reaction that they're all expecting and wanting from you. And I think that's a really good lesson in LOA, is just thinking about the situation and not making that judgment, not having that fear,
Sure.
be true to yourself and authentic. So I thought that was really useful. Yeah. Shifting that perspective to something that you're not being dragged into, that you don't want to.
So, Anne-Marie, you made a statement, don't react the way they would want you to. That is still giving them power to control you. You're now trying to a certain extent. So the way to look at it ideally is to say, I know where I'm going, I know what I'm doing, and I'm going to do it. Okay, forget about not reacting the way they want you to, what they're expecting, etc. Don't play that game. Just be really clear about what you want, where you're going.
Yeah.
Because there's another way of looking at the same thing, and this is the way I tend to look at it. It's not so much that the way you described it. It's more like, what would they be receptive to? That's the question I ask myself.
Yes. So one of those statements is what you don't want. One of those statements, yours, Walt, is what you do want. So what we're trying to say to Anne-Marie is yes, you're now clear about what you don't want. Write the statement that Walt's just put down next to it, rather, and then focus rather on that, and then leave the other one behind completely, and then you're really starting to work with LOA.
We also really, by the way, That was
Sorry?
what the conversation this morning was about, marketing, and that's precisely what we were talking about. Learning the language, so to speak, of the person that you're trying to draw into your circle, that you're trying to reach out to and offer whatever it is you're offering to them. Unless you can talk to them in their language and the way they think, you're going to have a hard time connecting. But once you do learn what they think, what they would anticipate, what would connect to them well, now you got a conversation going. Now you got a relationship going.
Absolutely. Because now you've got them feeling better because they focused on what they want, not what they don't want.
Right. Exactly.
So what I really want to do, and I've said this before on this program, but I'm going to reiterate it, there should be an LOA police.
I know you've said that before. You're under LOA arrest.
So I'm trying to think of the more positive words to use. The LOA guidance group. It doesn't sound right.
How about peace officers?
Peace officers, yeah. I want the biggest peace. Yeah. No, we were having this conversation again the other day.
It's challenging how these words work. I mean, we were talking earlier about how useful it is to have an English language, because the English is certainly the language that does this more than anything else. It has more idioms, it has more ways of explaining the same thing in words and so forth. And yet, with all that power comes the ability to trip over your own feet because of those same things.
Yep. I often remember my mentor many years saying, "Louis, your virtues are often your vices." It's like, what? I was just getting strong and hopeful and good about this thing, and now you're saying my virtues can be my vices?
Are you playing with my head just for the sake of it, or is there a purpose behind this?
Yeah, no, that's my mentor said many things that have stuck in my mind for many years. Like one of them, and this still gets me. She said, "Louis, stop looking for truth in dustbins." And you go figure that one out. Yeah.
Well, there's a value judgment that's built into there. That's the part that's tricky to figure out, because the value judgment is in the idea of the dustbin. You know, dustbins are undesirable to look in. That's what the inference is. Okay, so there's the value judgment. So what's undesirable?
Should you look in the Bible or should you look in illusions for your answers? Which one's the dustbin?
I suppose.
So that's the kind of thing that she was giving me. She was bringing all these new books like Illusions and Ramdas and all these other guys, great books, fantastic. And then she said, she kind of tricked me in a way. She's reading this beautiful passage, about love, and when you're feeling disappointed, shut up, and when you're feeling good, then shout it from the top of the hill, and it was going on and on and on. And this is 1 Corinthians 14 verse 23 or something, but it's beautiful. It comes out of the Bible. And she says, "Where do you think this comes from?" I said, "I don't know, but it's really beautiful." So it comes from the Bible. I was like, what? So there's a lot of beautiful stuff in there as well, but again, it's how you perceive it, how you look at it, and
it's true.
With what context you put it in and take it out of.
It also depends on what you consider to be a dustbin, because that's really what it comes down to. I mean, it's clear that she's saying stay away from dustbins, therefore dustbins are undesirable for whatever reason. And I suppose ultimately, if you take that to its logical extreme, then anything that's outside of you is a dustbin, because ultimately the connection inside is where you can trust continuously. Assuming, of course, that you're in a high vibe space. If you're in a low vibe space, good luck. There's not a whole lot going on right there. But as long as you're feeling high vibe, that's going to be the best place to go. So does that mean we should just ignore the dustbins? Well, I'm not so sure about that. Maybe.
But how messy would the world be without dustbins?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why I said I spent my entire life, 30 years, thinking about this one statement she made to me, and you can go round and round in circles, but
It's true. Yes, it
But
is.
the basic, the gist I think I'm getting out of it is, if you're looking for truth, find books that really resonate with you. Don't trawl through
Yes.
things that are, like she went through A Course in Miracles, which I think Walt. Now it's a book this thick, one passage every day of the year,
It gave
365.
me this big of a headache. Is what that.
Exactly. And I couldn't get into that as well, and I started to realize, I started to become very fussy with the kind of books that I read, and the ones that mean a lot to me. Like I was reading The Prophet again, which I don't know if Anne-Marie started yet, and I was feeling so emotional, more affected my soul, affected the core of my being again and again when I read this book, because I've got it on Kindle now.
Mm.
And it was just really hits me, and it's like, wow, this kind of book I can relate to. And you pick up the Bible, it just doesn't have that effect on me. It just doesn't.
Except for 1 Corinthians, but other than that.
Yeah. But certain things you start being very, very aware that you start being able to sift through what you feel is very valuable to you and what isn't, and you'll be able to do it in your heart, just like that. And it makes your life a lot easier, because when salesman comes to you, does this feel good, doesn't it? In or out? It's really
True.
easy. Doesn't matter what he comes up with or what they come up with.
That's true.
Unless they're a challenger and they challenge my belief structure, then I'm all with them. I love that.
Louis lives for that. That's like, please give me more of that. I love this. Yes.
So, anybody gives me a new idea, a new thought, and even the guy who sat on the floor in the sauna with me, I'm so grateful to him, because I'd never thought clearly about Source being perfect and Source expanding. It was delicious for me to sit there and contemplate it all. Because it was just something new that I hadn't really tossed around in my head. So, yeah. So, Anne-Marie, tell us something about you and your life. We've been very quiet before.
My life, oh my gosh, it's just so busy. Just busy. We've got birthdays, we've got weddings, podcasts.
Wow.
We're very grateful for that priority, by the way.
So yeah, it's so what's been going on? Things are actually rather lovely, I have to say.
That's good.
Yeah, family
Isn't
life
it,
just feels adorable. My kids, I just can't get enough of them.
isn't it
But yeah,
interesting
it's
when
lovely.
things are going well? We lack the words for it. We've got lots of words for when things go bad. We can
Bad.
discuss those
So
endlessly.
true, Walt. So true.
But we got things going good, and like, I don't know what to say. It's all good.
But you know what, Walt? There's a flip side to that. Is when somebody says, "I don't know what to say," you actually have a lot of respect for it, don't you? You kind of
In some ways,
feel, yeah, this is there's something here.
yeah.
I can kind of
But it's
feel it.
yeah, because I mean, like work and stuff isn't like what I want to do for the rest of my life, and that's
It's
fine.
not
But it
floating
just
your boat, but
it's not. But it's not important. It's
yeah,
really not
there we go.
important, but because
It is important for the
everything
patient.
else is just lovely.
Yeah. In other words, you're feeling good.
Yeah, I feel really fuzzy and warm. I actually feel a bit sick today, but yeah, I feel really fuzzy warm.
Well, except for today.
2 weeks
Yeah.
ago, you were not happy from when I looked at you.
No,
You were
no,
not
I
happy. I don't know
wasn't,
what it
was
was,
I?
but it's interesting, because you're feeling the contrast. You know what it is to really be shitty, and you know what it feels like to be better, and then you start. What LOA teaches you is you get a very fine sense of what's better for you and what's not. And when you do get into that negative space, you really feel bad. You feel it
You do.
keenly. You feel it quite keenly. Yeah.
And I think I've noticed a lot more is just like how my thinkings have changed because I've come sort of across people who in situations where I've been previously, and I view it very differently now. If I was in that situation, I would view it very differently, and I can see how far I've come, and that also makes me quite proud of myself.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Sure. And for
Yeah.
good reason. because you've been doing a lot of work on yourself, and now you can see the progress. That's probably the most important thing, seeing the progress. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, and it's also just thinking, and again, it's that kind of judgment thing, but it's like, I'm glad I'm not there. I'm glad I'm not thinking that way. And I'm glad, I still have my moments, human, but just being able to manage it a lot more pleasantly.
Yeah. With gentleness and civility and kindness. It seems to become clearer and easier for anybody to do who's on LOA. First of all, you're confident enough to you can afford kindness to people. Because there was this interesting scenario that I was told about. My daughter went to London, and because in Britain we had to put masks on again on trains. So one of my daughter's friends who went with a whole bunch of people didn't put a mask on, and this old grumpy man was saying, "Put your mask on! Why haven't you got your mask on?" And I laughed. I said, "I wish I was there." So my daughter says, "Why?" I said, "Well, I would have had a great conversation with the guy." What would you have said? I would have said, "Hey, do you like being a bully? Is it fun for you?" And the guy would have, I said, "Ooh, you really are angry, aren't you?" And then I would have said something like, have you just held a kangaroo court? And he would say, "What the hell do you mean?" I said, "Do you know she doesn't have a medical reason to have that mask on? Did you bother to find that out first, or did you just have a kangaroo court?" And I would have gone on. I would have had such fun with the guy. It would have been great.
Never give Louis a needle; he will use it.
But everybody else was just subdued and didn't really, deal with the guy. So. You just have to do this once to a person like that, and they will think before they do it again.
Yes.
Or at the very least,
they'll approach it
differently for the next 10 minutes as they're trying to figure out what just happened. It'll be one or the other. But when you're really confident, you can do these kind of things. It really doesn't phase you or bother you. Or emotional conflict is one of the things that I've mentioned a few times on the show. It doesn't bother me anymore. I actually enjoy it. I don't enjoy it so much. It's just if somebody really wants to attack or go for it, There's a story of two Tai Chi masters, and the two groups of students were getting into fights and all the rest of it. And eventually it got to the stage where both masters were going to fight each other, and both Tai Chi masters are standing there. Now, Tai Chi is the ultimate martial art, perceived to be in China by many. And they both stood there, and none of them did anything. And then they both turned around and walked away. And one student said, "Why didn't you guys fight?" He said, "Well, the first guy who moved lost, so we couldn't do anything." Because as soon as you get angry, you've lost. As soon as you lose your rag, as they use it, I think they use that word rag. As soon as you lose your rag, you've lost it. You've lost the game. Anybody who hasn't lost their rag can always make mincemeat out of you. Interesting too, because we also talk often here on the show about how when that's falling down the spiral is what that is. That's falling into the low vibe space. When you fall to the low vibe space, that's when you get the greatest benefits. Interesting contrast there on the one hand, but on the other hand, it's a very appropriate way to wrap up the show today, because it's kind of similar to what we talked about earlier. You mentioned the importance of confidence. We were talking in the earlier show about how important self-confidence is, and building mindset a constant activity in one's life, that you don't ever want to end it. So how appropriate that we're talking about the same thing today to wind up this show. Good stuff. Anyway, we do have, I want to remind people we're going to have a special guest tomorrow morning that I'll be recording the podcast on. And then we have the regular show tomorrow afternoon with Janine and Bridget. But in the meantime, thank you guys very much. Thank you, podcast listeners everywhere. And we will see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Take care, everyone.